One thing that I want to talk about is how to answer questions in your diploma. So you'll notice in your diploma that all questions have got command words at the beginning. So they'll say things like identify, outline, explain, describe, analyse, evaluate. So for example, if it's an identify question, maybe it says identify different signs of abuse. It's asking you to just pick out what those signs of abuse are, what you would look out for, and it would need to be just bullet points. A list is totally fine. You don't need to go into detail. You don't need to give examples. You don't need to write in full sentences. So an identify question is always really simple, really quick, just a list. Then you kind of move on to a describe question, and a describe question needs to be written in full sentences. So people think it's about the content, and it really is about the content, but you can tell as a trainer and assessor looking at a question whether it's going to have the level of depth that you need in the answer. So a describe question must be written in full sentences, and you should be giving maybe 2 or 3 sentences about the point that you're making. So you're trying to give detail about what you're actually saying. So if you just write one word down, straight away your assessor is going to know that that is just not enough detail for that answer. So it must be written in full sentences, and really you look at 2-3 sentences to describe something. For an explain question, it needs to be even more detailed than that. It should be written as at least a paragraph, depending on what the question is asking you to do. It needs to be written in full sentences. We're talking 4-5 sentences, but it should be at least 1 paragraph. If you're having trouble getting the difference between like a describe and explain, for explain, you'll think about how, you're thinking about why, and you can add examples in there to support your answer, just to clarify it a little bit more. When we're going into a little bit more detail, you might have an analyse or an evaluate question. So analyse is similar to explain, but it's actually going into so much detail that you're pointing out all the key areas and you're actually explaining each one of those individually. So you're not explaining the whole thing overall, you're actually breaking it down into all the different elements and you're explaining each one individually. You should think of an analyse question like an essay question. It should be made up of several paragraphs. An evaluate question should be very similar, where you're kind of analysing something, you're breaking it down, but you're reaching a conclusion at the end. You're giving your opinion on it, or you're evaluating how effective something is, again in your opinion, according to this analysis that you've done of that information. So again, an evaluate question should be written as like an essay style with several paragraphs and a conclusion at the end. Sometimes you'll have a question which says compare. Compare is really important, the language that you're using. When you're comparing 2 things together, you will usually say things like more than, less than, more effective in these situations, less effective in these situations. So more or less are really important words. What you're trying to do is compare them against each other directly. So you do not want to write 1 paragraph about one and then 1 paragraph about the other, because that is not a comparison. Okay, a comparison means there has to be links made between the 2 different things that you're comparing. If you're comparing 2 different theories, for example, you might compare, for example, which one was thought of before the other one. Is one older than the other one? Is one more recent than the other one? Which one is broader than the other one? Which one is more like detailed? Which one works better in this situation? Which one works better in a different situation? Which one would you use? Which one would be your kind of preference to use, and why? So you're making those direct kind of links between them within paragraphs, rather than writing separate paragraphs about one and then the other. And finally, something like a summarise or an outline. This obviously doesn't need to be written in, like lots of detail like an essay or paragraphs, but what you need to be thinking about is giving enough information that someone who is looking at it is able to understand the main points of what you're talking about from this information. So for like a summarise and an outline, it would be okay to kind of bullet point your answers or to write a paragraph about them. But you need to be thinking about the level of detail that someone would be able to, identify what it is that you're talking about, and be able to understand kind of the main information about it. These are really important when you're answering a question, because if you don't get the command word right and you don't get the level of depth and information that you need and the key words that you're kind of using in that, it means it's going to go backwards and forwards between you and your tutor, and you'll need to make improvements over and over again. What I would suggest is always doing one piece of work. You know, it's got a variety of command words in there. Getting your tutor to have a look at that piece of work, to mark it, give you feedback on there, and then you'll be able to see, you know, is there something in particular which is coming up over and over again? Am I always forgetting to put examples in my explain question? Am I never using those contrasting kind of words in my comparison? Is my evaluation always missing a conclusion? Keep going back with the same assignment to your tutor until you understand those command words and you get them right. And then you'll be so confident to do your other assignments, and it'll be much more likely that you'll get them right first time. You'll have that understanding of what you need to include in order to answer those questions. I hope that helps.